ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side. Got all of the loving growing inside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the New Now. I'm delighted to be talking with Iam Saums once again. Today, we are going to communicate on communication. It's something we've been discussing over the last little while. You know, our connection here is jumping a little bit, our communication, but such is life, and that's the way things go. Iam, nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you too, Lorenzo. Thanks for the opportunity.
So even though our connection is skipping a little bit, let's discuss communication, its importance. And, we've talked on this topic a few times on the effectiveness of learning from other people when you put yourself in a place where you are open to what's being shared instead of pushing your ideas on them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I over the last few years, I've taken a lot of time to observe not only communication, but how I choose to listen to others when I'm speaking with them, or where my listening is when they're speaking with me. And I've noticed that over time, when you have a certain amount of awareness, which is what the article is that I'm working on right now, when you have a certain amount of awareness of your listening, it really empowers your communication. It really empowers your ability of being able to express yourself in such a way that you're more present and you're more engaged and you're more connected and related with the other person.
Do you mean by opening yourself fully to what they're attempting to get across to you in their ideas and what they're sharing in relation to the moment of, the topic that you're discussing?
Oh, absolutely. For sure. It's weird because one of the things that I speak about in the or write about in the article is how much we misinterpret what other people might be saying or meaning behind the words that they choose. And a lot of the times there's a selective listening that goes into play when there is the agenda that we all have with our egos in regards to communication and making sure that, and maybe it's an insecurity of making sure that we're heard, or this belief system or filter that we have in place that has us feel like we're not being heard, or that we have to push our communication in such a way to clarify and to justify that in our experience we're being heard. And that really complicates in many ways the communication. Specifically for me, there's been many times where I've expressed myself in certain ways with certain people, and it comes out very different than the intention. There's an intention that I have in the words that I choose to express, how I feel or what I think or what I believe. And sometimes even my words that I choose don't best represent the intention that is there within. So it's like this programmed and conditioned filter that we probably adopt or allow to impact us in a certain way, so that when we are expressing ourselves, it comes out not entirely accurate in the way that we feel.
So do you mean that when you're trying to get an idea across, it can be blocked from both ends, so to speak? You're pardon my rudeness, in that maybe what you're trying to say is being altered by your emotions at the time, and what they're hearing might be altered by their emotions. So yeah, as I was saying, the emotional blockages, I guess, that come on both ends, so to speak, would definitely be something I found that does complicate communication, in that if you're thinking about what's going on and the other person is thinking about what's going on, then you're not in the moment of what's going on sometimes, because you're seeing something that's gone on usually in your past in relation to what you're discussing. And it's a habit of mine anyways, to jump to a conclusion without waiting to see what's coming and where things are going, in relation to who you're talking to about whatever it is you happen to be discussing.
Sure. And I feel like communication is such a multidimensional experience, and it's not just the feelings or the thoughts, but it's also the instincts, and it's also the intuition and the element of the intuition that's a part of all of our conversations or all of our communications, at least the potential for that. I believe, and part of the article talks about this, I believe that when people have a presentness of instinct and intellect and emotion and intuition, then something really magical happens. There's a resonance that grows between the two people or the group of people that are communicating at any given time. And that resonance grows and grows. And over time, when there is understanding, when there is acceptance, when there is that authentic listening, then it becomes something that is remarkable and extraordinary.
Well, how do you get there? I mean, being the type of person I am, an artist, someone who's watched life from many perspectives and dimensions, even the beginning of this video in you going up and down and side to side to find a good spot for us to communicate in, to me is a metafictional reflection of what it is we're discussing. Because, we've both been patient, we've both looked from the proper angle, and then we've both finally settled down in an area and in a way to communicate with each other so that things are clear between us. And, how would that maybe tie back into what you've said in relation to?
For me personally, it's a lot of meditation, a lot of a practice of being present to my instincts, my thoughts, my emotions, my intuitions, my insights, the things that come to me, creativity, imagination, all of that. And finding that equilibrium, finding that balance between the multidimensionality that we all have, as in my belief, universal beings, and it's very difficult to do that, and it's not a perfect practice, as we all know, because we can hope or strive to be as conscious and aware and open as possible, but there's always going to be different dynamics with different groups of people. Our moods are different, our personalities are different, the environments in which we communicate are different, and different things are triggers for us, different types of communication. I mean, obviously, one of those examples is, the vaccination, or, the interpretation of on a political level or religious level, or any of those things that are hot topic, but controversial subjects that tend to push us into a space of not being able to find that authentic listening. And it is a multidimensional experience, and it's something that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of being present to find that equilibrium within.
So, I mean, you have a desire, and I've had a desire, over the years to become a good communicator, mostly because of the challenges I found in, the opposite. If you're a poor communicator or you don't listen, generally I've had horrible experiences in life, circled back to them later to find out that isn't what the person meant, or that isn't what I meant, and they didn't hear what I was saying. And so, I had so many, painful times that, it kind of forced me into deciding that I wanted to be a better communicator. How would you suggest, perhaps to some of the viewers listening, to, your article you mentioned you're working on is Ears to Hear. How do you begin growing that pathway? How do you become open to having ears to hear instead of, emotions to be manipulated through?
I feel it's about practicing that authentic and conscious listening. A lot of the trends right now that are going on in the world are around consciousness and awareness, and being present and empowered and creative and imaginative, and seeing things in a different light. The one thing that I would recommend to anybody is the ability of being able to practice that listening. Like when you're in a conversation with somebody, being present to the thoughts that are triggered or that are there even before the conversation starts, or the instinctual responses or the emotional impacts that may or may not occur in the midst of the conversation. But it's something that has to be practiced and practiced and practiced, much like meditation or prayer or anything else, that has us become more accustomed and more fluent in that language, because I believe in as much as communication in choosing the right words to express ourselves and represent ourselves is as important as practicing that listening, because I believe the listening is the foundation that we can stand in to communicate authentically and intentionally, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I mean, if you're not listening to the person communicating, you're listening to something else, right? Whether that's your internal dialogue or your own thought process. So perhaps you're not hearing what's being shared. Are we? Can you hear me all right still?
Yeah, you're still going in and out. I don't know what it is that's going on with the connection.
That's okay. So
but which is kind of symbolic in some respects because of the communication, and that we're able to find a foundation of communication across the world in the midst of technical challenges, so to speak.
I would totally agree. So getting back, I guess, to the definition. What would you say is a good definition of communication? Let's go there. What would that be for you?
Being present. I mean, before the words, even before the listening, I think being present with the person, that in and of itself is a extraordinary practice to begin with. Being present to the person that you're with, because there's so many things both within and without that are taking us away from that focal point of being present. And it's not something that we're taught. It's not something that we're even conditioned to have as a practice. And so for me, the being present to the person that you're speaking with or communicating with or resonating with, better way to say, is like I said earlier, the foundation of that communication. So I guess the definition of communication is being present in my perspective.
It's a very good definition. To see where you're not present or how you're not present or what is taking you away from the present, and even why you're in the arena, let's say, of communication. I would say it's very important as well, to figure out, perhaps, even if it's just to yourself, why it is you're having that sort of interaction with the people or person that you're communicating with, and bringing that to the forefront. I mean, I found, personally, if I'm honest when something is bothering me and I bring it up, generally I'll find I'm wrong. Do you like say, do you mean this, right? Are you saying I'm no good? Are you saying I've made a mistake? Are you saying, somehow I have wronged you? Let's say if it's a communication where it's a little adversarial, so to speak. And, often enough, I'll find 80% of the time I was wrong in my judgments of what it is that was going on at the time. And I had jumped to some sort of conclusion. So I erred in my communication, in other words.
It's easy to fall into the duality of communication in and of itself, because that's the nature of our reality. That's the nature of our society. That's the nature of life itself, in the life that we live. And so being able to step outside of that duality gives us the opportunity, because I believe, like I say in the article, every moment is an opportunity to communicate. Now, whether it's with another person, or whether it's with ourselves, or whether it's with the universe, or whatever faith that you believe in, it's every moment is an opportunity to be present, to get to a space of communicating with others. But I think that people have to really communicate well with themselves, and it starts with our connection and relatedness with the universe. And it's going to be difficult to communicate in general if people are not communicating with the universe or their soul or whatever you want to call it, and they're not communicating with themselves. So it doesn't surprise me that we have so many communicational issues and challenges in society, because a lot of people don't have a practice of communicating with themselves or with the universe or something higher than them to be able to have that foundation of relativity.
I would agree. I mean, more and more these days is people, I would say, confuse being told something with communication is the challenge that comes up, because you're told with your school, you're told, let's say, from the TV or your cell phone or whatever media you may watch at the time, and there's usually a one-way communication going on in those kind of systems, right? It's not two-way. It's like you're being told what to do and then you do it or you don't. You're being told what to believe and then you believe it or you don't. But there's no and then you're being even told how to feel, whether it feels good or it feels bad. From commercials when I was growing up, and I used to watch a lot of TV, to the so-called modern day where there's propaganda everywhere you turn. Perhaps people need to understand, as you've said, what it is that communication even means, what it means to a heart level and a soul level. And I agree with you, but how would you say someone understands, let's say, the need? Because perhaps, as I've seen, a lot of people don't even understand or realize where they are in relation to the fact that they're poor communicators, let's say. How would you broach that subject with someone viewing this, saying, what would I need to look at to decide if I'm a good communicator or not?
Well, I think you bring up a good point in regards to the media or the things that are broadcasted out into the world, because we live in a society that is very engineered, very conditioned, very programmed, and very influenced by, obviously, that authoritarian rule that exists. A lot of people don't want to talk about these things because they start screaming conspiracy theory and all of this stuff, because in most cases they just have insecurities and they don't want to accept the realities of what's really going on. And it's easy for people to adopt that perspective because these groups or organizations that are doing these things are very covert about their intentions and their existence. So, but getting back to what you were talking about with the communication, one of the things that has really helped me personally, besides the meditation and the prayer and music, creativity, imagination, and writing, is just attempting as much as possible to take myself out of sometimes out of my own experience. Because I think that when people, and it's good to be in our experience, not to say that it isn't, but I think that we become so enamored and tethered to our experience that it's almost impossible for us to see through our own filters to really hear people, where they're coming from, what their concerns and insecurities may be, what their fears and anxieties are. I mean, it's easy now in the world because everybody's pretty aware of why everybody is fearful and has anxiety and has experiences of extreme challenge based on what's been going on in the last 2 years. But for me, sometimes it's good for me to really get out of my experience. I mean, with my relatedness and my life with my wife, it's been an amazing lesson for both of us to be able to sometimes step out of our own experiences to really be present to each other and to really get and hear where each other is coming from. And I think that's another hurdle for a lot of people in communication and relatedness, to be able to step outside of their own experience, because I think sometimes our experience becomes that filter of relativity. And so, like I said, it's a very delicate balance and a very delicate equilibrium, not just within, but also without, with the people that we're attempting to relate to. And I would probably say that we're not even able to, because of all these different nuances of our personalities and our environments and our upbringings, our heritage, whatever. Those are the things that have become the filters, the biggest filters, those things that we don't see. It's what we don't see about ourselves, or what we don't know that we don't know about ourselves, that ultimately results in the filters that don't allow us to reach the full potential of our relatedness. And I believe that that's the reason why a lot of the things that are going on and have been going on in the world for centuries exist because of that, the filters that we all carry. And I don't believe, personally, I don't believe, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else, but I don't believe that I am relating to my full potential.
Mm.
And there's a lot of things that I do to practice every day to get present, and to extend a listening to people in an authentic way. But I don't reach the full potential. I mean, maybe I never will, for relativity, because it's just, maybe it's not possible to do that fully and completely in the dynamic in which we exist in social reality.
And perhaps you've hit the nail on the head for a good way to start is, without putting a word to it, humility seems to be what you're describing. If you understand that there's more growth and there's more potential and more you can do, and you're not at the final apex of your own intelligence or conclusions in life, whatever they happen to be for you, I would say you humble yourself to new ideas, new answers, and new information. And I would humbly say perhaps that's a challenge for a lot of people these days, is that they're not humble enough in their opinions, as far as realizing maybe whatever it is they think is fact is just an opinion. I was wrong so many times, right? And from there, maybe, there's more right coming, we'll say.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm glad that you bring up humility, because I believe that humility is a remarkable way to be able to express authenticity and to even be present. So getting back to the humility, I believe the humility is a way to be able to get present. It's a pathway or an avenue in which we're able to become more aware of not only ourselves, but also the people in our lives and our relatedness with the universe. So I'm glad that you brought up humility, because I believe that that's a cornerstone of relativity in many ways. And it just, ever since I started writing this article, and even before that, I have just become more and more present about how I occur in the world or to other people. I have an opinion or perspective or ideology of myself, but there, obviously, we all have the experience of loss in translation. We have a personal loss in translation of somehow, and I mean, this, I guess the best way I can express this is creatively. So if I sit down and I write a piece of music, I sit in the experience of the song. I'm not like writing out notes, and I'm not like writing down lyrics, and I'm trying to get present to the experience of what is there for me in that moment. And being enamored and immersed in that experience helps me to be able to capture the infinite possibilities of any note or any chord progression or any dynamic that can be there in the music. So I think the same thing could be said if you look at it from a standpoint of relativity and my relatedness with myself and the universe. These things are always fluctuating. They're always changing, depending upon our mood, our personality, depending upon our environment, depending upon, a memory that comes up that may influence or impact our ability of being able to express ourselves. So getting back to the loss in translation, I think a lot of the times, or I feel that a lot of the times when we're expressing ourselves, we get lost in translation within ourselves. And that makes it even more difficult to communicate and relate with other people, because that in and of itself is also another filter when it comes to being able to, because personally for me, these days, after all the meditation, prayer, music, writing, whatever else I'm a part of, after all of that, there still is an element of mystery. There still is an element of the unknown. There still is an element of my experience that I'm not even aware of, because of the capacity that we all have, or the lack of capacity that we all have, to be able to be present to all that is possible within the infinite experience of our lives. And so for that relativity to occur and to create that resonance that, not only within ourselves, but also with other people in our communication and our listening and all the things that are a part of that, it's a remarkable endeavor. And most of the time we're not present or conscious or aware of how much of a remarkable endeavor it is or can be.
Being a perceiver, I have seen, is one of the highest of attainments you can accomplish in this life. Allowing what's not inside you to come to you. I had to come to a place where I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. I wasn't as clever as I thought I was. I forget the quote, but I remember it was some famous scientist who said, they were finally relieved when at around 50 years of age, they realized they knew nothing. And, and then they were from that point able to understand even more, because they could throw all of their concepts, beliefs, past history into the garbage heap, so to speak, and just, see with new eyes and a clearer imagination what's being shared to them from the outside in, instead of trying to push from the inside out, which I feel is where a lot of the conflicts in communication come, pushing an agenda or pushing,
Sure.
trying to push someone somewhere to believe what you're believing without realizing, well, everyone's free to believe what they need to believe. And, you're free, I would say, to continue a communication with someone or not, to build a relationship with someone or not, to decide you want to work with someone or not. Obviously that's something that, to keep a job or not, to keep a relationship, to keep a geographical area as where you live or not. The rest, we have very little control over, I found, what's coming from other people towards you. Maybe it's the ability to grow up and accept that, or for myself, like you said, I'll speak for myself, that has made me a much better communicator, to allow people to express what they need to and not try to push them anywhere, and then to decide from there if I want to do or create more of a relationship with them or less of a relationship with them, and to see where it takes me in my life without any
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm glad you bring up control too, because that's such a major component of our lives, or at least that's our perception of what our lives are all about, whether it's something that we're aware of or whether it's something that we're not aware of. Because I feel that that control really hinders our ability and diminishes our ability of being able to express ourselves and also to get present to other people. And the control element to it's an artificial power. And that's one of the things that I've been writing about lately, is making the distinction between authentic and artificial power, much like authentic reality and, artificial reality or simulated reality. And because we exist in the social reality that we do, most of it is artificial. Most of it is just an illusion. And even the realities that we have chosen to live, our jobs or our practices or whatever, that could even be an illusion too. A lot of that is an illusion. So I attempt to look for the things that I resonate well with. Like you were saying earlier about the quote about throwing out everything when you're older. I've sought to not know anything, because I think, in my opinion, for me personally, knowing is not at the heart of what it is to be or what it is to experience or exist in a multidimensional way. It's a part of it. It's just one element of the multidimensionality that we all express as universal beings. But there's so much more than just what we know, because, like you were hinting at earlier, what we know is very less than what we think we know. If that makes sense. We think we know a lot about a lot of things, but I tend to set my focus towards what I feel and what I experience on an intuitive level or on a higher level of emotion. Because if you look at it from a standpoint of the multidimensional dynamics of our beingness or of our being, we have our instincts, there's many different levels of our instincts. Some are very good. They save our lives. They put us in the right position at the right time for opportunities and things that can happen. There's our minds or our thoughts, our intellect that gives us great clarity and definition in regards to our experiences and being able to communicate, find the right words, or write down the right things when we're writing an article or sending a letter or an email or things like that. Then there's like the emotions and the wide range of emotions that we can go through. Some of them are anger and fear and anxiety and stress, and some of them are love and peace and joy and happiness and all of those things that bring us up. So there's like a wide range of those three different domains of our being. Then there's the intuition, which in my opinion is the gateway to beingness, where we're able to use our intuition to connect with our soul and the universe. Because in my belief, or at least what I have learned to believe, is that our soul is one with the universe. There's no separation, and so our relatedness with our soul in this existence of reality, 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, 4-dimensional, whatever you want to call it, that's so vital in being able to be present to others and communicate. So in essence, we're representatives of the universe. We're representatives of the universal being. We're representatives of our soul. And making a commitment to be a representation of our soul is all of our destiny. And if we choose it, in many people dismiss it and don't think that it's important as, making money or getting the promotion or getting a new car or whatever, there's so many other things that can get in the way between that and universal being, especially given the fact that, there aren't a lot of avenues or outlets to learn how to make that alignment with the soul and the universe through our intuition, with the balance and equilibrium of all the different domains and dynamics of our being. So it's just a practice. And I've learned a lot from Laura, from my wife, about how to listen. For all of us, our significant other is the best teacher in being able to not only listen to, but also to have that person really feel like they're heard, which is in many ways more valuable than money, gold, whatever is out there that people place value on. Because if you're having a communication with somebody in whatever domain, and they feel heard, they feel gotten, they feel connected, they feel related with not just you, but the resonance that's going on when it's really clicking, then it's a extraordinary experience. And so I've gotten to the point where, in as many relatedness that I have with people in my life, and all the people that I have in my life, I've attempted to find that resonance. And it's tricky because the resonance is always different. Like the resonance you and I have in this moment is different than the resonance that I would have with my wife or a friend off the street or somebody at work or whatever. So it's like an adaptability thing where you're able to adapt within that relativity to be able to establish that resonance. But like I said earlier, the foundation of that resonance is the listening, the authenticity of the listening, and the gift that we can give to people by having them feel like they're heard.
You can listen, I would like to expand on a point here, perhaps, and tell me what you feel. And there's so many ways to listen, right? Most people, when you hear listening, think you're hearing words, but you can listen with a smell, you can listen with a feeling, you can listen with a vibration, you can listen with how the world is communicating to you. Yesterday I wanted to walk in a certain direction with my wife, and I started feeling angry inside for whatever reason. And, for me, I've learned that was an indication that maybe I'm walking in the wrong direction, right? My body just started to feel upset. So I immediately took a right down a different street. I went in a totally different direction than where I was going. And I had a very interesting, fantastic, powerful, and unique day that I would not have expected had I gone towards where I thought I was going to go that day, right? So, I learned to be in communication with the universe at large, which was communicating beyond my head what was going on, in relation to where my feet were taking me. I think what I'm getting
and I think that gets back to what you were talking about with control. Like
Yeah.
when you let go of the artificial power of control, you put yourself in a position of being able to be in flow with the universe,
Mm.
in flow with nature. And when you find that equilibrium and you're able to surrender the control or the ego, or what your perception, what you thought was the best perception or the best approach into any experience,
Mm.
that allows for the opportunity to arise, to be in flow with the universe. And I know what that feels like, to be in flow with the universe, and I attempt to be there as much as possible, because within that flow is not just like insight or wisdom or transformation. Even within that flow is the most valuable thing in the universe. That's energy. And if you have that flow of that energy, and that energy is always there, we're not always going to be in that flow of that energy. We're not always going to be aligned with the universe. There's always going to be something that attempts to take us away from it, or that we allow, better stated, to take us out of the flow of the universe. But there's something remarkable about being able to be in that equilibrium, find that focus, find that expression, and become that representative of the universe, finding that flow of energy from the universe, and then riding the wave as long as we can in the moment.
Yeah, I think I would agree. Perhaps it's as simple a choice as deciding why you're here in this life. What you've decided to do. Maybe you've decided to be someone who collects 87 cars, or has a lot of money in 4 houses, or maybe you've decided that you have a different purpose. I don't want to say higher purpose, because in some ways that would be egotistical, but maybe you have a different purpose. Perhaps there's a difference between pressure and stress. I'm starting to find, like, the wind blowing a leaf would be pressure on the leaf. Stress seems to be an internal fear-based destructive process, whereas pressure, this is something I've been playing with over the last few months for myself. If I feel a pressure, my brain may interpret that as stress, but my spiritual being might interpret that as a nudge in a different direction. Right? So it seems to be a fine line between the two when I'm trying to become the best communicator, as we said at the beginning, with myself in relation to my end result, which for me is just to exist in a higher level of communication with my soul, with the universe, with the all that is, and see what it's trying to share with me as a good direction for my life.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's all that we can hope for, because it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be ideal. It's never going to be a situation where we are always in that flow or alignment with the universe, where we're always in the fluency of the energy, where we're always being supplemented or empowered by that energy. Because I believe every moment is an opportunity to be able to connect and align with that energy, that universal energy. And I believe truly that it is all of our destinies to be able to do that. And though it's a very difficult endeavor to continue to be, with all the things that are going on in the world or our daily lives, or even within our minds, or our instinctual impulses, or our lower vibrational emotion, there's many different things that complicate our ability of being able to be in that flow.
Maybe something that could help any of the viewers in a communicative or communication related sense is that, why are you in that sort of situation? Like, maybe you're having the kind of communication that is a positive one for you or feels good. Maybe you're having the kind of communication that feels bad, an argument or a disagreement or some such. And if you take responsibility for maybe in your life what brought you into that situation, beyond pointing blame, shame, or guilt, you might be able to find a different answer to alleviate that situation and help with your communication skills. Maybe I'm making up new words here. Communicative skills. Sure, I guess we can say that.
Sure. No, and I think even like what you just said regarding good conversations, bad conversations, even the bad conversations can turn out good, depending on whether or not you're willing to transform them. And over the course of the last almost 20 years, not all the conversations were easy and light with my wife, but both of us had a commitment to be able to navigate our way through our own instincts, our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own intuitions, to be able to more often than not arrive at a space together where they did become good, where we did learn something from it, and where we did find a relativity on a different level than we hadn't before. And one of the things that I always mention to her is, when I look at myself as who I've become now, specifically around relatedness and listening and authenticity, I would not be the person that I was had I not had her as the teacher to me, and her as a vision of clarity, so to speak, and understanding. Because I believe that, and I feel that being heard and listening really has a lot to do with understanding and acceptance, and accepting people for who they are and accepting for people who they aren't. And that even if we choose to perceive that people being something that they never might ever be, that's not a bad thing. Everybody's a different person. Everybody has a different experience. Everybody has a unique hereditary background or history. Everybody has a different expression. But that gets into the importance of the uniqueness that each and every person has. The fact that everybody has a very individual and extraordinary expression of their being that allows them to bring something to the world that only they can. And that extends to the listening that they are willing to offer to people. And so it's a very multifaceted gift that each person brings to the world. And whether it's their creative expression, or whether it's their vocal expression, or whether it's their physical expression of how they move or how they speak, with body language, or, the words they choose to express, all of those things are very unique and specific to that person. And no other person in this world can bring that specific, unique dynamic to the world. And that's why I think that's probably why I write the articles that I do, to help to empower people to see their personal value, their individual and unique value, and how necessary, specifically now in these times, that is.
That's a very interesting way, I think, of seeing relationships. I find, for what's come to me when we've been chatting about this is perhaps to see the limits or not of the reason you're communicating with such a person. As you say, in other words, you and I are going to have a different conversation when we're chatting about spiritual practices and or being attached to the universe, as in relation to the fellow that's going to fix my computer when I walk into the store, and we're negotiating time and cost and what have you. So it may be a good way for our viewers to see the communication is to kind of look at what's going on in relation to why they're there and what they're communicating about. So you bring a certain aspect of yourself to a certain, you're going to bring a certain aspect of yourself to, let's say, a sweat, as we've discussed, in relation to, when you fill up your car for gas, and you're at the corner store and buying whatever, a granola bar for the day, so it'll be a very different set of values you're going to bring to the so-called table at the time, and maybe that will allow a lot of the stresses to go where they need to go.
Sure. And every experience is probably not going to be extraordinary. It's not going to have that universal resonance. But I've noticed that even the extraordinary can be brought to every ordinary communication or conversation, even in a work environment. Like recently, one of the ladies that works in our office had a child, a baby. And so the baby's been coming almost every day to work ever since it's been born. And I've noticed that, speaking about language and listening and communication, I've noticed that the baby is very aware. It doesn't have its words yet, and it doesn't have a full understanding of what's going on. It's like in that space of awe and mystical, wow, what is this place? Who are all these people? What is this room? All this stuff going on, perhaps for the for the child. But I noticed as recently as today, when I was interacting with the child, mostly through facial expressions, because I've noticed that sometimes the facial expressions, especially with children, really make a connection. You know, it's another type of listening, you know, on a different level. But I've noticed that I can say something to the child and she understands, you know. So like I say something like, well, don't you think that it would be nice to treat your mother better, you know, like just as a joke, and she'll do this. It's funny, you know, because there's a part of her that understands, like maybe it's not the words, maybe it's the vibration. I mean, like most of us were children, and because we can't remember, because we go through that process of programming and conditioning to society and relativity on this level. I mean, we're wide open as children, as kids, as babies. You know, we're seeing things that most people probably don't. We're being able to interact, or we're impelled to interact in ways that most people don't, without words, without, you know, all the other social nuances that go into communication and relatedness. But there's just such an authentic and pure form of relatedness that I think we all can have with children and babies and so on and so forth, because they really bring us into a whole different space within ourselves. When there's a child in the room or a baby in the room or whatever, we automatically shift out of the mundane talk, you know, day-to-day kind of experience, and we're shifted into a different space. It's almost like we're brought into that space of awe that the baby or the child is in. We're brought into that. It happens to me a lot personally. I mean, I won't speak for anybody else, but it happens to me a lot where I get drawn into the child energy, and that comes out in me. And it's easier for me to relate. It doesn't work really well with my wife, but like with a child or a baby, it really works well. And so now the baby, like every time she sees me, she smiles, you know, because my relatedness with her, or her relatedness with me, or vice versa, has been such that it's always been a very positive and light-filled experience for both of us. So maybe it's the energy that she's seen, or maybe it's just the persona, or maybe it's something else I'm not even aware of. But I think there's something that can be said about being able to interact with children and babies that can really help us in our adult lives to be able to relate and connect, because the child or the baby is way more connected naturally to the universe, you know, because it just came from the universe, right? So it makes a lot of sense that the baby will be able to interact with energy or with facial expression or any way else that it can in that moment, or in that at that time in its life. So that's another element to communication and listening that I've been really present to lately with her, you know. And then her older sister is a whole different animal, because she's 40 years old and she can talk, and you know, now she's starting to learn how to manipulate and all that stuff, and steal my food off my desk and whatever else. But getting back to the listening and the communication, it is something that I think it would really help us all to be able to remember that part of ourselves when we were a child, or when we were babies, when we were innocent, when we were pure, when we were present, when we were connected very strongly with the universe, that we eventually lose in the process of individuation, in the process of conditioning and programming that we have to endure through in society.
Well, perhaps you've hit the nail on the head, so to speak, of a commonality that we all have. We've all been babies. We've all been children. We've all had interactions with them, at least when we were small. And, you know, maybe it's something that can be remembered to reclaim if you're having challenges communicating. You know, perhaps the difference between work and play. You know, most of us, I think, forget how to play when they grow up and start working. And, you know, the babies and children, obviously, they love to play. They love to use their imagination. They're always experimenting with the world in ways that are different from the adults. And, you know, for me, again, I'll talk personally, when I recall that my life is play and my days are play, and I'm even, you know, in every interaction, even when I'm working, if I do it properly, I'm still playing, I'm not really working. And from there, I believe anyways, or from what I've seen, you have more options coming to you when you're playing than when you're trying to work out a situation.
Yeah, and I think the practice of meditation really helps me to find that clean slate that I believe that naturally babies and children do have, because there's not a lot of established or conditioned programming that they've gone through. So they are wide open and they are seeing things impelled by the perception that they have to adopt, or the perception of not even having a perception at that point in time because they're just in observer role. And that's another part of the article that I'm working on as well, is that the essential necessity for observation and communication. Like, to be able, that I think that's a part of the listening of the communication and relativity, is being able to observe, and observe not from a selective perspective of what we want to see, because a lot of us just observe from a space of what we want to see or what we want to hear or how we want things to go. Like you were saying about your walk earlier with your significant other. So if we're able to come into a space of innocence and purity with our observation, that helps us to get into a space and do a practice of listening with that authenticity and with that openness, so that it creates that foundation to build that resonance energetically and otherwise between us and other people in their relativity.
I would agree. The more you open yourself up beyond what's going on in your head, the more I've realized, the nonsense I've put there over the course of my life, on purpose or by accident, the more I can open up for observations and to see that there's more potential that comes that way, because the world is generally going to offer you a good option, I found, even if you don't think there's one at the moment. If you're patient, usually a much better option than something that you don't like gets offered to you one way or the other.
That's the biggest hurdle too. I feel that when we get trapped in our minds, or even we get trapped in our words and in the intellect, it's very difficult to break out of those patterns of conditioning that we go through in our social reality in which we exist. And so that's why I, like I said earlier, that's why I practice meditation. That's why I pray. That's why I step into the experience of music, especially in the writing process, or even like when I'm writing an article. I'm not looking at it from a standpoint of words. I'm attempting to, and unfortunately this happens in any creative endeavor. You have to take all possibility for anything that is potentiality and creativity and imagination and the expression of that into this world. And ultimately it becomes condensed, because in order for it to exist in this reality and for it to be commonly experienced or observed, it has to be condensed in a way that people can generally understand it. And I think that's something that I've always struggled with as a musical artist, as a writer, that when you have to take all possibility and all potential in the universe and the energy that exists in an infinite and eternal way, and condense it down into words or to notes or to like a physical representation, whether it's like a piece of art or a sculpture or something like that, it takes so much out of the overall experience, the multidimensional experience, being in alignment with the universe, that you can bring into this reality. It takes so much out of it. And that's why it's like, people like, for instance, David Lynch, when he writes movies or when he does movies, he has that openness of interpretation in such a way to be able to allow each person to have their own interpretation in how they view it and experience it. And there's other people that do that too. I mean, the Grateful Dead were really good musically at doing that. They had, open free form improvisational jams so that you heard something different all the time. Different people heard different things. They experienced different things in different ways. But when it becomes a rigid structure of notes or words or things of that nature. It's almost like you have to read between the lines or read between the notes of what's being put out there to really get at the heart and the essence of what the expression is. And unfortunately, I think in many ways, creative expression is misinterpreted, and I believe it's misexperienced, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. It does. I think the best art, the best music, as you say, the best even cartoons that are drawn, there's a space between the creator and you where your imagination makes that bridge. And that's what, that's where the beauty, that's in my opinion, the difference between, art and, regurgitation or, beautiful music and, like a pop tune or whatever. It's the bridge of imagination, which connects you to the all of everything, which is where the magic happens, in my opinion, with just about everything, and maybe that's why, you and I both enjoy interacting, we'll say, with children, is their imagination seems to be full on and fully engaged, more so than when most adults get older. And perhaps that's, a good thing for anybody that wants to become a good communicator to remember, keep your imagination strong. It does help. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I find more often than not, I have been listening more so than I speak as a general practice personally. And I found that doing so, listening more than I speak, has really expanded my ability to observe and experience. And it has really expanded my ability not only to have that relativity with other people, but ultimately that will create, or has created, more of a relativity with myself and with the universe. And I think that came from a lot of the meditation and the experience of prayer and other things of that nature that has helped me to be able to really expand that potential to have that listening. But yeah, more often than not, I guess if you had to boil it down to one seed of truth through this whole conversation and the article that's coming out, is the best practice is to listen more than you speak. Because I think the more that we speak, the more we become a representation of our mind than we do a representation of our soul.
Good advice. If everyone became a better listener, the world would be a better place, and you wouldn't be pushing agendas, and you wouldn't be pushing your ideas. You would just see what's there, and perhaps it would give you an opportunity to take a pause and, make a higher choice in how you want to act next, from a loving place instead of from its opposite, I would say.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we may have come to a good conclusion in this conversation. Listen more.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think so. I mean, we've come all over the place. I wanted to discuss a little more, maybe at some future point on imagination and allowances, and letting that, direct your choices in life. But, it seems from every great conversation I have, there's always 12 more that crop up as potential side venues for exploration at a future date. So, this has been fun. They always go somewhere I don't expect.
Yeah, and I'm glad that the creativity and imagination came up, because listening and being related with the universe is everything to do with creativity and imagination. You have to, in my experience, I've had to really listen to the universe and to my intuition and my soul to be able to bring into this world what becomes music and articles.
It's true. It's true. People have forgotten that you don't just listen with your ears. You listen with your heart. You listen with your guts. You listen with your imagination. You listen with your dreams. You listen with your nose. I found that to be essential, to listen with the smells that I come across in my life. Whether a place smells good, a store smells good, a street smells good, a person even smells good or not, to me, I will take that as an indication, of a different way to listen in relation to how I should be or not be in the moment and at that time. You can smell fear on people, that sort of thing. So for sure, listening with everything can only make you a better communicator.
For sure. Well, it's been great. It's been great communicating with you, Lorenzo.
I'm enjoying it as well. It's always going somewhere new. This is fantastic. If anyone has any questions for Iam, if anybody has any suggestions for future chats, if anybody has any suggestions about the topics we've discussed and would like some answers or recommendations or ideals that could be further looked into, feel free to leave a comment or some links below. I will leave some links as well to Iam's music, some of his compilations or compositions, pardon me, are being expressed in our Odyssey of Truth. And as we discussed maybe before we came on, Iam and I might be working on some music together as well. So there you go. Iam, is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers with on the way out?
That's it. Just thank you again for the opportunity to have this conversation and to step into that type of listening.
It's my pleasure. I'm always learning, and you've given me, again, 3 or 4 enhanced pathways to develop myself through these interactions, and it's why I like doing them. I'm always learning. I'm always getting better, and I'm always getting more intuition into how I can become a better person in life from these interactions, and I hope our viewers are as well.
Good one. Anytime.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you again very soon. I love you all very much.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what